Well, hello there, everybody, and you are super welcome to today's episode of the ESG and Tech Show. My name is Susan HayesCulleton, and I am delighted to be your host for today's episode and indeed throughout this show that we have recently introduced right here at VectorVest. Now, have to tell you that today we are going to be talking about a very exciting subject, one that really can change the trajectory of how we consume things, how we produce things, where we buy things and how we buy them. And that is because today we are going to be talking about how 3D printing changes everything. Now, as usual, what we're going to do today is we're going to have a chat just around the context of it itself. We're going to have a look at how 3D printing happens, how it's different to traditional printing, and then we're going to take a look at two different elements of it. One is going to be the tech and one is going to be the sustainability. We're going to take a look at, from a technological point of view, how does 3D printing happen and also where is it heading for. But we're also going to look at the sustainability aspect of it as well. Is it a clean technology? And is it something that is evolvingly a clean technology, or is it something that could do more harm than good when it comes from a sustainability point of view? Then, of course, what we're going to do then is we're going to move into the more economic side of things and look at where is this industry going, what companies are leading the way, and then we're going to bring it nicely to a lovely close at the end by looking at some stocks and some ETFs looking at this particular area and to see what is happening in the markets around this subject today. So that is where I'm going to take you on today's journey with 3D printing. And before I do that, I would love to hear where you're tuning in from. Now, ordinarily, I tell you that I am live from Dublin, and I hope that wherever you are, that you're happy and you're healthy and you're safe and you're well. This time, I am actually tuning in to you from a place quite close to Windsor, outside London, in the UK. Yes, indeed, I have been on my first flight in 18 months and popped across over here to the UK. My husband's uncle is based over here, so we came over to see him, and then I stayed on for a little bit extra then to catch up with my own family that we haven't seen over here for some time, and I've had the most phenomenal time. And the last thing that I'm going to do while I'm here is host this show, and then I'm going to be heading off to the airport. So on that note, I'd love to hear where are you tuning in from, and as usual, I am checking out over here. I am checking out the what is happening on the chat, so I am interested here to see where people are tuning in from, so please do pop it into the chat. Now, just so that you're aware about how the chat works, if you are joining in on a desktop device, well then you simply look for the chat underneath the video and then you'll see it there. Now, if on the other hand you're on a mobile device, you might see a description underneath the video. So in between the video and the description, you will see chat. And if you press on that, well, then you'll see the chat that's happening. So what I can see here is that David is tuning in from St. Louis, Missouri. I can see that this is Can tuning in from London, not too far away from where I am right now. And also, in fact, you mentioned that you are quite close to Windsor as well. Yes, gorgeous part of the world. Gorgeous part of the world. So while I've been here, I've been in Henley, I've been in Marlow, I've been in Cliveden, I've been in Maidenhead, I've been all over. So please do keep your comments coming in. We'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. And I can see, hi Diana, you're also tuning in from London. Great Diana, great to have you here with us today. And like I was mentioning, I'm just outside Windsor where I am myself at the moment. So not too far away from you at all. So please do, as I say, please do keep your comments coming. I love to hear where people are tuning in from and what's happening, what's going on in your world, for sure. I see Ardal here listening in from Ireland. That is, of course, my husband. So I'm delighted to see that you're here too, and also that you got home safe and well, based on the fact that you were here with me not so long ago. I can also see David says he doesn't know where the other listeners are tuning in from. We'll give them a chance, David. We'll give them a chance, and I'd say we'll hear where they are too. Okay, so what I'm going to first of all start off with doing is I just want to take you through exactly what 3D printing is and how it's different to traditional printing. So as usual, I have created a couple of resources for you before we started here today. So I'm going to pop on over here and I'm going to pull them right up for you. Okay, there we go. So the first question that I'm asking here is, what is the difference between traditional and 3D printing? Okay, so In essence, when we think about traditional printing, what we're thinking of is what's called subtractive, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this up here now, is subtractive, right? Subtractive 3D printing is when you take something and then you basically refine it down until you get what you want. That is what subtractive printing is. So the reason that I have it in the shape that I have it here is that you can see is that it starts at the top and then it basically, you whittle it down. So subtractive means that you take something away. So if you think about anything that you even think about cooking, is that if I'm going to maybe put vegetables into my dish, I'm going to take away the outer skin, or I'm going to take away what's on the inside, or so I'm taking away things before I decide what I actually want. Now, on the other hand, what 3D printing is that it's the opposite. It is additive. So what additive means is that you start at the bottom and you work your way up. In other words, you add things to what you're working on. That is what 3D printing is. So as a result, you're actually starting off with your raw material and adding other raw materials to them until you get towards your outcome. So theoretically, and we will explore this topic, theoretically you are actually arriving at an outcome that should have less waste, because rather than starting off with something raw and chipping away at it, you're doing the opposite. You're starting off with something simple and then you're building up instead. That is the way it works. Now, if you actually have never seen a 3D printer work, I got this super quick video for you. It's over here. I'm going to expand it out and I'm just going to play this video for you, right? So I'm just going to talk over it. There's no sound or anything. I've muted the sound. And what you will be able to see here is just what additive means. You can see that the printing adds layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. Now, what you're looking at here is actually a time-lapse video. It takes less than 50 seconds, but it's actually a time-lapse video over 26 hours. So you can see there the way it happens is that you're adding. And as a result, when you get to the end, you'll see how the tower is actually completed. I'm just going to wait until it gets to that point. Okay. And I'm just going to bring you back here to what the outcome actually is. I'm going to pause it because there is another point to mention here. Okay, I've gone a little bit too far. Okay, let's go back to here. And it's after jumping on again. Okay, this video really is moving quite quickly, so I just want to wait until the tops are on the towers. Great, perfect. Okay, just going to stop it now right there. So if you look also in the middle, okay, just looking into the middle of this, you see the way it's hollow, that there isn't anything in there. On the outside, we don't care, do we? We want to see what's on the outside of the tower. We want to see at the top what's in the tower, and what's on the inside, we don't really care, particularly if it's covered over. Now, maybe if we want to see a 3D model of a house, you might want to make sure that the inside is hollow. But generally, when we're looking at something where all we are concerned about is the outside of the thing that we're looking at, it doesn't matter what's on the inside. And this is where 3D printing can really make an environmental and cost difference, is because if you can actually print something and where certain parts of it is hollow, number one, you don't use the materials, and number two, when you're transporting it, well then it also doesn't have the weight. And if it doesn't have the weight, well then it decreases the amount that is actually the amount of power and energy that's needed to transport it. So for all of these reasons, 3D printing truly is quite revolutionary, because we are starting from the ground up. We are adding to very more progressively very specific outcomes. And as you can see here, rather than trying to take something in from the inside and take it out, or simply leave it there, what you can do is that you can have a hollow space there as well. So that is the way in which it works. Now, if we were to also think about, I'm just gonna pop on over here for a second. I'm just gonna take a look at the comments, because I see there's lots of people commenting now. I see Gust is joining us from Belgium. Gust, all going well. That is going to be where my next international trip will be in a couple of, well, months' time at this stage. But hopefully I'll be seeing a lot of you there. So this is Can says, the best 3D printer I've ever seen is in a marble factory. That's an interesting point, just how you refer to material that is actually in the 3D printer itself. And I'll come back to that in a little while. And David says, actual rockets are being 3D printed and will be launched into space. Well, of course, space is where it's all happening at the moment, David, isn't it? Based on what we've been seeing arising from some very well-known celebrity entrepreneurs around the world in recent times. So another thing that I want to move on to, though, is that I just want to look at the industrial applications. And as I say, as we move on, we're going to particularly look at where this arrives at in terms of the stock market, but we need to understand the trajectory of the industry before we can understand its future. So if you think about what I've just shown you here, there's a lot of applications for, maybe it's modelling. Okay, so maybe it could be modelling from the point of view of modelling houses, from an architecture point of view and so on. Of course, manufacturing as well, if we can use a material, particularly what has been used to date in 3D printing has been plastics. So if you can use a specific material with a view to delivering an outcome, of course then this can be extremely precise. You can have extremely narrow print runs. They can be very, very specific. In fact, they can be unique, they can be customized, they can be tailored. So we also, of course, have that application. But one that is being talked about a huge amount, of course, is the biomedical industry. What if we could print pieces of people's bodies? For example, could we print prosthetic hips, knees, shoulders? And of course, one of the companies that is most well known in the world for this is Johnson & Johnson, and the specific company within Johnson & Johnson would be Depuis Synthèse. So Depuis Synthèse, as the name suggests, prints prosthetic parts, and therefore they can be extremely tailored and customized into, so that they can be placed into somebody's body. But maybe the thing is that we shouldn't just think about the end outcome, but also think about the inputs themselves, because if Depuis Synthèse, which it does, can print parts of raw materials, or print the raw materials themselves with a view to then adding them to other sourced products, well then of course then that dramatically speeds up the supply chain, and it can decrease cost depending on what happens. And of course the other thing is that it reduces risk in the system as well. So when you look at biomedical engineering, it can be to deliver the actual outcome itself as well as feeding into the inputs along the way. However, what I think is also very interesting is I just now want to play for you one other quick video, but this time I am going to turn on my sound. And let me play this for you. So this is about prosthetics, but not in the way you might think. Let me play this for you now. And even I can't hear that. So therefore, I'm just going to make sure that we can play that properly. There's our culprit. Now, there we go. And let's go.
Last Derby, a little over 3 months ago now, I think, I had adopted a dog through this rescue group called Peace and Paws. He was born with deformed front legs. And I kept looking at his photo and hearing his story, and I cried literally every time. Finally, I messaged her and I was like, okay, I'll do it. Foster, I'll take care of him. I had to try and help this dog. We decided to get him a cart, which worked quite well, but they limit his mobility in terms of being able to play with other dogs, and it's not really the full motion of running.
For this project, we're using a variety of 3D technologies, and that allows us to get in there and really modify the organic digital models quickly and easily, and start to do the sort of designs that Derek wants us to do.
The great thing about using 3D technology in Derby's case is having these images on file on a computer and being able to print them is a lot quicker than having to hand sculpt every single mold and rebuild these braces 5-10 times.
With prosthetics in general, a lot of the designs are going to this Running Man sort of look. And I was concerned with doing a Running Man that he would end up digging them into the dirt. And so that's really where I came up with the loop idea.
Hey, Derb, you got your new legs.
We started him off very low, and so that it wouldn't be too drastic. We have a line called the Project 5500, which enables us to run dual materials. That has really been key with designing his prosthetics.
I got it. I don't become impressed very quickly, but when I saw him sprinting like that, it was amazing. It just, I couldn't believe it.
The first time he was put on them and he took off running, he was just so happy. I was absolutely amazed at how well he did.
He runs with Sherry and myself every day, at least 2 to 3 miles. He runs faster than both of us. He never really tires out. He's just so happy to do that.
This is what 3D printing is all about. To be able to help anybody, dog, person, whoever, to have a better life is just, there's no better thing to be involved in.
And that is Derby the dog story. And the point that I wanted to bring to you is that biomedical engineering, of course, is something that can apply to lots of people in lots of different areas. So on that note, let's now go back and consider a couple of other points. So that is the difference between traditional and 3D printing is, in essence, one is subtractive and one is additive. I see Margaret has just joined us there. You're very welcome, Margaret. Delighted to have you here. Delighted to have you here indeed. And thank you so much for making the time to join us. So why is 3D printing something that is of benefit to the world? Why is it that companies are finding that customers are willing to pay for it, etc.? So first of all, it enables rapid prototyping. So if you think about it, if you can make an extremely tailored, customized print, and then be able to print one, change one thing, and then amend it, and then print again, is that does enable very rapid prototyping. Similarly as well, if you want to visualize more than 2D being two dimensionals, like for example the plans of a house and so on like that, then it really does enable rapid prototyping. It increases efficiency, as I mentioned, from the point of view of being able to be adding things in as opposed to taking things apart. And also it allows for a lot of pivoting and testing along the way. It permits the manufacture of unique items, like you saw there in the case of Derby's paws, in terms of biomedical engineering and so on. Now, here is though where we do need to be a little bit critical, and we need to question around the clean tech nature of 3D. Does it actually reduce production costs? Yes, it does. It does. It does, because you have got far less waste. There's no doubt about that. But actually, on balance, it does actually reduce carbon dioxide emissions because of two reasons. Number one is there's less waste in actually printing something as opposed to taking something and chipping away at it. But number two, and this is where things are really different, and we do have to think about this and the impact of retail, which I do want to talk about as well. But when you think about transporting X to Y, for example, I have a microphone here beside me, my Yeti microphone. I have it all the time. I bring it everywhere with me. And like right now, when I have been traveling over here to the UK, I brought it with me. But I bought that on Amazon, and I can't remember where it actually came from. I think it was somewhere in Germany. But of course, the microphone needed to be transported from A over to B in order to get to me. And since then, I've been bringing it around with me. 3D printing could actually enable me to be able to buy the pattern or buy the actual digital print of the microphone and get it printed locally. And that then dramatically changes the amount of commercial transport of things as a result. And if you think about it, like I remember back in the earliest days of VectorVest, when way back when I used to be starting off at VectorVest first, a decade ago, we used to print the materials that needed to be printed in the US and get them shipped across. And then I said, why are we doing this? For example, we could simply get them printed in Dublin or get them printed locally, wherever I was traveling to for whatever trade show, like Gust in your own case in Belgium, let's get them printed there instead. And we started doing that, and of course then that cut down on shipping costs, naturally enough, because before that there wasn't anybody like me based where I was. But the thing is that in future, we could say that of any type of thing, whether it's books or whether, I'm looking around here for inspiration, whether it's glasses, whether it is TVs, whether it is a wardrobe, no matter what it could be, is that do we actually need to move things, atoms and molecules? Do we need to move things anywhere? And that is the question. Now, actually owning something and bringing it with you, like I would still obviously be bringing my microphone with me. But on the other hand, there certainly wouldn't necessarily be a reason for me to be buying. And of course, I'm taking it to the nth degree, but that's what we need to do to really understand this industry. Why then would I need to buy something on Amazon in Germany to get it shipped across to Ireland? Why would you need the idea of shipping anything? Unless, of course, it was of sentimental value. But apart from that, why would you need to do that of anything? And that is actually the biggest environmental impact. And then, of course, the third thing, which I have already alluded to, is that if you can print things that actually weigh less, as somebody who's going to be getting on a plane in a couple of hours, that's important. But if you can actually print things that weigh less because of the materials or because there's actually less that's needed to be in the physical thing that's printed, then of course that also has an impact as well. If it is being transported or even in the use of the materials that are used within it at all. So as a result of those, it does lower the energy consumption over the life cycle of a product. And of course, blueprints can be shared digitally and printed nearby. Now, and then the last thing is the possibility to recycle post-consumer materials. Now, who was it that said it to me? Can. You were the person that said, the most impressive, is that what you said? The best 3D printer you've ever seen is in a marble factory. Well, then we also have to think about, you know, what exactly is going into these 3D printers? What are the materials that can be used? And the reality is that you can print anything, theoretically, but practically you need to make sure, just like paper in a 2D printer, that whatever you're printing needs to come through that surface. And that also, of course, has its own impact as well. But since you're actually only you're only adding, you actually aren't subtracting from anything, there is less waste. But apart from that, is because you're actually using a different type of material that can be smaller to add in, like basically powder that is added in and that then is sticking the 3D, what is being 3D printed together. Well, then of course at that stage you can actually use much smaller materials, and as a result of that you could then therefore use post-consumer materials, in other words things that have been used already. So it ties right into the circular economy. So on balance, 3D printing can actually be quite a more sustainable, environmentally friendly technology. It can be. Now, there are also criticisms of it, and of course it is important to remember those as well. So the last part that I'm going to talk about from a sustainability point of view is this, is that when it comes down to determining if 3D printing is in fact a clean technology, is number one is the design choices, is how you're actually designing the thing that you're printing in such a way where you're minimizing the use of the actual material itself, and as well as that, how you're sourcing your materials. So what is the source of the materials that you're getting? Because of course what you may be feeding in to that 3D printer may also be something that you've to extract out of something else. So it's additive when it gets into the printer, but what happens beforehand? So the design choices of whatever is being printed certainly plays a role. Then of course the source of the energy. I mean, is the energy being used in the 3D printer, is it something that is being born, let's say, of solar energy, or is it a fossil fuel or any other type? That also of course will have an impact on the environmental impact, on the, yes, that will have an influence on the environmental impact. And then of course the types of energy that are used as well, the types of energy that is used within the process, as well as the type of energy that is used in actually making the whole product a product, as well as what it's being used for. So if you are going to take something like biomedical technology, where you have got a lot of individual things and they have to be printed at mass with the view to hopefully suiting various different types of people, well then of course you're going to have to print a huge amount of that batch or of batches so that they can suit individual patients or individual clients. Whereas instead, of course, when you are dramatically decreasing the amount that's being printed, but you're dramatically increasing the specificity of what specificity, I said it 3 times, now I have it, then in that case, then of course you're dramatically decreasing the amount of resources that it takes. And then finally, as always, whether the products are properly recycled. So I didn't want to come on here and talk to you today about, in the spirit of the ESG and Tech Show, about a technology without considering its environmental impact. And I think we also do have to be careful on one point as we transition into the next part of today, because we also now need to look ahead at the economic impact and particularly the economic future. Because of course, as investors, we do want to look at the industry, and the industry is going to be underpinned by its buyers, like consumers and industrial companies, and generally companies of various different sizes. So it's going to be underpinned by buyers, it's going to be underpinned as well by the macro economy and so on. But I will just make one point. You know, in doing my research for today's show, it's interesting how many people were talking about 3D printing from a novel and a fun point of view. And of course, you know, that's natural. I can understand that. I'm just going to close down that slide there for a moment, and I'm just going to bring you back over here. Just going to bring you back over here to me for a minute. So the thing is that a lot of people talk about this from a fun and a novelty point of view, and I'm going to tell you briefly about my own first time that I saw a 3D printer. Before I do that, I'm just going to look over here because I see that there's been more comments, and please do keep them coming. Please do keep them coming indeed. Khan says semiconductors too can be printed with 3D. Yes, and I'm going to push the boundaries on what can be printed by 3D pretty far during this episode. David says there is a 20-minute YouTube video entitled Genius of 3D Printed Rockets. Well worth watching. It reinforces everything Susan is discussing. That's interesting, David, actually. I might take a look at that. And so if we think about the fun and the novelty aspect of it, I just want to, as I mentioned, tell you about the first time I saw this. I was on a business course 2012, and I remember that they brought in this company who was a 3D printing company in almost the north of Ireland. So it was, further north, further than Dublin North. And they brought in this company. And at the time, what, David and Can, this is the reality of the difference between where we're talking and where things have come from. At the time, this 3D printer was on one of only 5 in Ireland at the time. And it could only print the height of 5 reams of paper, and it could only print paper. That's all. Okay, so it could print that tower like I was showing you there earlier, but it could only do so if it was the height of 5 reams of paper. Okay, so like round about this height, and it was only paper that could actually print. Now, it could print very clear models of houses, but it was based on paper. So the idea that some of you were saying there about, semiconductors or plastic or marble or even like I was mentioning myself with hips, knees and shoulders, like that's pretty recent. So if we move on then, when I talk to people now, and I've spoken to people in Depuis Synthèse about this, about where this is going, there is that sense of novelty and fun about it as well. And the question is, could we see a 3D printer in every, for example, school in the world, or maybe in the developing world, or could we see it in lots of schools? Then will we start printing things just because we can? And the thing is that where would this stop? Because could we print plates? In fact, you already can. Could you print shelves? In fact, you already can. So then do we actually move from a consumption-driven world of where I buy what I want when I need it, to then a production-driven world, which is that I print what I want when I need it? And this is going to be the other environmental challenge that it meets, because the next trajectory, and this is pretty clear of any literature that you'll read about 3D printing. 3D printing has proven itself A, to be feasible, B, to be potentially possible from a profitable point of view, and C, it has been proven as well to be able to use a variety of different materials in order to expand, the depth of a product that can be printed, etc. But where it absolutely has not got to is mass production. It absolutely has not got to there. And of course, that is the next frontier. And during the conversation that we're going to have today, I'm going to explore how close we are to that. But that is where it's at. It's certainly it's used for manufacturing, testing and pivoting. Yes, it's used in architecture. Yes, it's used in biomedical. It kind of is being used a little bit here and there for novelty and fun in education. And so therefore, this whole industry is pretty embryonic. But when I show you where it can go, I'm not saying that it will go there, but when I show you where it can go, it really does understate everything that I said in that title, which is 3D printing changes everything. So now let's go and let's take a really good look at the economics of this, and let's just take a look at also the impact that the pandemic has had on the economics as well. So I'm leaving the technology behind, I'm leaving the sustainability behind. We're done with that, unless you have any questions or comments. I see Margaret has a point here. I'm just going to pop over and take a look at that. So now what I'm going to do is move into the economics of this and the trajectory of it, and then we're going to take a look at the stocks. Okay, Margaret says, do you think it's possible that one day people will have 3D printers in their homes the way many people now have computers or smartphones? Oh, absolutely. I think it's possible. Absolutely, Margaret. I think it's possible. And, as we move into the economic side of this, the cost of these has dramatically fallen. For example, one of the stories that I was reading in my research in leading up to today is, a teacher talking about being at home with her kids and homeschooling her kids. And she got a 3D printer for $200. And, she was just deciding what they could do and what she could teach her kids about shapes and sizes and, the tangibility of things and so on with that. So do I think so? Yeah. I mean, the people that I met in Depuis Synthèse, for example, when I was talking to them about this topic, while they use it industrially, some of them have a 3D printer at home as well, just to try things out because they're curious. So do I think so? Oh, I do. Whether there will be a need for them, I don't know. Do I see the need for me having a 3D printer in my house? maybe not at the moment, but you never know. And Diana says they're already used in the home. Yeah, they are, Diana. It's just the pervasive nature of them. Will they become a thing to have, like a toaster or an oven? The other thing, as I'm now about to move into the economic side of this, is that we also have to think about not just the environmental impact, but also another industry that it could displace, like retail. Why would I need to buy something from Amazon if I can push a button and print it? And why would I need to buy clothes if I can just push a button? And instead of, my online purchase being a box that they actually arrive in, is that instead I push a button and then something gets printed. Maybe in the future that fashion designers or fashion outlets in general, that they actually don't sell the physical cloth, but that they sell the digital pattern and the inputs. And none of this, I'm not being extremely futuristic here. This is where the 3D printing world is kind of on the cusp of moving into. Okay, this Can said Boeing and F1 are already using 3D printers for some of their parts, and why wouldn't they? Again, you can really customize something down. It's additive, decrease waste, and which now is going to lead me directly in. So at this stage as well, I'm just going to check in there with Joey. Joey, just going to check in with you. Will you say hello to everyone, because everyone always loves Joey? Will you say hello to everyone and just let us know if there's anything that we need to be aware of at this stage? But just Joey was here with me. He must have been here with me for about half an hour before, a good while ago before the show started, just making sure that everything is a-okay. So just saying hello there on behalf of everyone, Joey, to you, and just checking in with you. Okay, so what we also need to think about is in economic terms now, what is the impact of COVID-19 on the industry? Great stuff, all good. Glad to hear it. So what is the impact on the industry? Well, when we need to be considerate of that, and I just need to make sure that I'm bringing you with me here. Very good. Okay. I just changed my screen there without bringing you with me, so I'm gonna have to do that. Now, here we are. So what is the impact of COVID-19 on the industry? So as you can see here, there's a couple of different points that I wanted to point out to you. First of all is production and demand. Okay. So production and demand means that COVID-19 has changed what we're actually looking for. It's actually changed the things that we demand. So for example, we couldn't buy things in the shop anymore. Therefore, of course, that changed the demand for retail in an in-person basis. And instead, of course, what dramatically increased was our demand for retail online. To take again, and I know I keep harping on about the fact that I'm actually physically in another country at the moment. I'm just so excited about it. And I've been here for a week. Like, I have been here. I flew out of Ireland last Thursday and I'm flying back into Ireland Wednesday night. I've been here for a week. The novelty has just not worn off. You know what? I hope it never does wear off. Because it kind of didn't wear off beforehand, but now it really is pretty special. But if you think about, we didn't demand airlines. We didn't demand the services of airlines and all that goes with them. The packaging and the food that goes into airlines, the diesel that fuels airlines, all of those things. COVID-19 did change the demand of what we had. We also, of course, changed our need for cars to physically go places, and lots of other places. And look, that conversation is well worn at this stage. But the demand that we had and the production to service that demand that we had has changed as a result of COVID-19. And where that's going to go, I'm not really, well, no one is really sure, but we just have to remember that some temporary changes will certainly form part of permanent lifestyle. So on that note, actually, oh, hi, Newbie Fitch. I see here that you are here from Canada. Oh, you're super welcome and good morning. Julie, that's so fantastic, Susan, that you've flown over. Yes. Oh, great stuff. Glad that you're here, Julie, that you've rejoined here on VV Live. And thanks, Margaret. Great to see that your comment there as well. Can I just check in with you, right? Before we go further in this, since I am making a big deal of it, how many of you are intending to fly somewhere within this calendar year, within 2021? How many of you are intending to fly anywhere? And you'll see where I'm going with this question. So it doesn't matter whether it's, regionally, domestically, internationally. How many of you are actually intending to fly, and where do you think you're going to fly to? So in my case, like I mentioned to you earlier, I'm here, and all going well, in a couple of months' time, the end of October, I will be in Belgium as well. So Diana says yes. Okay, you're intending to fly. Okay, Diana. Let's hear from other people as well. Where are you intending to fly and where? The reason I'm asking this is that I noticed that just this week, Aer Lingus, so the national airline in Ireland, that its flights is actually now been increased again up to 50% of its pre-COVID schedule. Now, I actually thought that was pretty high. Who else am I seeing here? Julie said she'd love to fly to Canada to see family and friends. Yeah, I've only been to Canada a handful of times, Julie. Newbie Fitch says would love to fly to Cuba for a vacation. Who wouldn't? Let me see there. Diana says Los Angeles if the US says yes. Yeah, I'd love to get over to the US as well at some stage, Diana. Ian says Wisconsin to Colorado. Lovely. Herbert says not me. And Ardle says yes, with two airplane emojis there, and of course that's because he's just gone home not so long ago. But you see the point I'm making there is that we are seeing a return in demand. Now, I personally was somebody that flew a lot for the 10 years pre-COVID as I was travelling with VectorVest a lot, but the business expectation has changed. So this is my point, is that COVID-19 and the impact, let's say, on the airline industry, and as measured, even if we take that sample size of what we've been talking about today, if we take that and then underneath that we look at what are we demanding, we are demanding fewer flights. We are demanding lower capacity in our airplanes, or else we are demanding a variety of other things. When you take all of that into consideration, then of course, then that changes the need for what supplies are needed, and then that changes the demand for whether there could be a worthwhile investment in 3D printing. So Ibrahim, I see that you're flying to Norway in 3 weeks. Wonderful. And Mikey Smiley, what a great name, says flew to Mexico and California. Very nice. Oh, very beautiful parts of the world. Been to California many times, never been to Mexico, but I have seen it. I have seen it from San Diego, if that counts. And sure, I suppose hopefully I'll see it there at some stage. Okay, now the second thing is that I want to move on to here is supply chain and market disruption. Now, how many of you have experienced delays in getting something to you as a result of what happened in the Suez Canal? Dare I say it, because I know I'm talking to a lot of people here today who are in the UK, dare I say it, Brexit? Dare I say it, because I've seen up close and right here in personal, I have seen the impact of Brexit. While I've been studying it, I've studied it for years. But particularly yesterday, there was an announcement, for example, that there is now, for the first time ever, almost 1 million unfilled vacancies in the UK, for example, arising from other different things. But let's say Brexit. And then number 3 is because people physically could not safely get to their workplaces, manufacture within their workplaces, deliver service to their workplace, etc. So for all of those reasons, we have seen supply chain and market disruption, right? So there's 3 reasons: the Suez Canal, like I say, regulation and Brexit and so on, and border checks and times and all that sort of thing. Or, of course, we've also seen COVID-19. If I was to go back further, I mean, do you remember the volcano back in 2010 in Iceland? That was when things physically couldn't get from A to B. How about we take all of the risk out of the system by simply printing what we need ourselves? And that is the other thing that COVID-19 has pointed towards the industry, is even if it was cost neutral, even if it did require investment that would have a long-term payoff, even if it is possible, even if it's difficult, even what you put in whatever even you want, but it takes risk out of the system in order to access parts. Or, in fact, we could go further, is that if you can tailor a part to be printed, let's say to go into a plane, rather than going through 4 different sets of a production line, well then of course you can dramatically increase productivity as well. So for all of these reasons, when you actually think about the risk that these 3D printers take out of the system. Now, of course you could say to me, but doesn't it also add risk in? Because what happens if the machines break down? And then you're centralizing the risk, because if anything happens to 3D printers, and of course if they were to be hacked from a cybersecurity point of view, you're actually centralizing risk. And I understand all that. But my point is that COVID-19 has shown us what happens when physically things can't get from A to B, because the people can't bring them from A to B safely. Now, let me see. Julie says the impact of Brexit has been terrible. Yeah, Julie, I have to say, I suppose to a large degree, I've been reading about it and seeing it, but being here and experiencing it, yeah, it's pretty significant. So this is Can says shortage of toilet rolls for sure. Yeah, I suppose I was thinking bigger scale there, but I see your point, and thank you for adding that in. Okay, so financial impact on firms and on financial markets. Okay, so what I just want to tell you there is, again, look, we've spoken about this before, and I know we've spoken about this before, and many people have spoken about this before, so I'm not going to elaborate too much on this, but in my opinion, we are seeing and continue to see a K-shaped recovery. And I believe that the K-shape is that the companies that are building and growing and expanding and adding momentum are those that have been able to lever technology to do so, because technology doesn't need social distance, whereas those that have, then of course that is going in a different direction. They are at the mercy of government regulations. They are at the mercy of a limited amount of, whether it's tourists or whether it is people who go to restaurants or and all those things. Therefore, there are certain cohorts of companies that have been in a great place financially and profitability wise and so on, where they have been able to dramatically, soak up revenue and profit and cash flow. And on the other hand, you have companies that haven't. So that also, there has been, great swathes of our economies right around the world that have been disproportionately impacted in different ways. Construction, for example, when I look at construction, that is an industry that was stopped for a period of time. And now, certainly in Ireland, has a significant backlog. You look at hospitality, backlog, well, people did eat. Okay, now the experience of tourism and going to stay in a hotel is different. That might be pent up. But people did eat along the way. So it's not like they're going to come into a restaurant and not have eaten for 3 or 4 months. So it's not quite that there's a backlog there. Of course, there's a cash flow backlog in a different way, but that industry was starved, you could say, for a period of time apart from government assistance. But that now it's actually trying to get back to where it was, as opposed to having this rush of pent up demand. Then, as I mentioned, airlines, I do think that there's going to be a change there. I mean, the need to travel for business has dramatically fallen. The amount of business travel that would be flying business class relative to economy class would be very, very high. And in many ways, business class subsidized economy class. So if you have a dramatic decrease in the amount of people flying business for either economic or sustainability reasons, how would that affect the back end of the bus as well? So there's all of these things. And of course, everything I'm telling you about, I'm looking at from a macro point of view. They all require things. And of course, that is the real predictive indicator of where this industry might be set to go. Okay, so I'm going to move on now, and I am just going to yes, Julie's right. The ability to Zoom has changed a massive amount. You know what it has, Julie? And it has changed so much more than I think we even anticipated, because Zoom, you can do so much with it, and you can have the face-to-face with it, and we become very accustomed to using it. And it decreases the need to commute in between. And I don't just mean commute to a workplace, in between, meetings at all. As we move on, and because I'm conscious that time is moving on us, and I want to get us to the stock market, of course, is this was MarketBot research that was done and published in 2021. And this was from a survey. I'm always conscious of surveys, and you should be too. As a trained economist, it's always important to look at the source of your sources, okay? And so in this case, MarketBot research actually conducted this across 1,200 responses in various different industries. And I thought that was important. I was looking for at least 4 figures of response. It was quite US based, but I was also looking for sector diversity within here. So the key statistic that I took out of this was nearly 3/4, or 74% of respondents, were planning to invest in 3D printing technology in 2021, with 50% of them planning to spend up to $100,000. Now, if we're talking Aer Lingus or Boeing, or we're talking any of these companies, 100,000 it's a dot on a spreadsheet. It wouldn't even be a number. But when you are looking at that kind of smaller company where that can actually make a difference, this is what I'm trying to say, is that 3D printing is moving from novelty, specificity, testing, pivoting, learning, into how can it make the difference right into mass market. And if it does, where do we look to next? Okay, so I'm going to do now is I am just going to minimize that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all bring you over. I'm first of all going to bring you over to an ETF that I found, and it is called Print, PRNT. And the reason that I went looking for an ETF is, of course, any of you who've been on the show before, that what I like to do is to give people a way in which they can look at a range of different stocks together, in case they don't want to look at any one specific one that's in there. So I found this particular ETF. It's called PRNT. Okay. Now, this is joined in the VectorVest system since 2017. And as you can see here, the net assets is $500 million. So like pretty small. It's about $500 million, and the expense ratio is pretty high at 0.66%. Now, if I was just to show you over here, I'm just going to show you on a graph what PRNT looks like. Let me get that for you right now. There we go. So as you can see here is that, as I say, it started off here in 2017 on the VectorVest system, and ever since then it's kind of really didn't really do an awful lot. Now it did fall from 23 down to the low of 1380. So yeah, round about a little less than half there when everything did last year. And then it went through a pretty meteoric rise. From then, it has risen, like it has risen and risen and risen. So had you been buying, let's say at the bottom, and of course few of you would have done that, but let's say that you were buying at the bottom of 13, it actually, it increased just about 3.5-fold over that 10-month period, right? So very, very significant growth, very, very significant. But ever since then, as you can see, that it has, first of all, it went through a significant fall over here. And as you can see here, it's been basically holding its own since then. Nothing majorly happening. Now, I do want to point out though, and I write this in my views all the time, is that it's always worthwhile. I'm just going to zoom in here to a month. Okay, it's always worthwhile watching what goes on over here at the RT level. Always, always, always. For those of you who aren't familiar with VectorVest, RT is relative timing. Relative timing is an indicator that looks at a stock's direction, okay, so going up or going down, magnitude, how fast it's going up or how fast it's going down, and dynamics, how volatile it's going up or how volatile it's going down, and it puts all of that together. Now, it basically tells us where the weight of the money chasing that particular stock, or in this case, the ETF, is going. I'm always conscious that I want to see a stock where the RT is above 1, and ideally I want the RT to be rising. But what I always look out for, and you'll have seen it in my views, I write about it a lot in my views, is that I always like to look for stocks where the RT was below 1 recently and is now pushing above 1. And that is, I'm just going to take off the average volume here. That is what I'm seeing right here, is that it was previously below 1. Okay, so you can see that. Then it has been falling, and now it has actually bounced off 1, exactly 1. And today, so far, it's up. Now, I know why it's up, by the way. I'll take you directly to the stock of the reason why it's up. But the point I'm making is that the fact that it is bouncing off this resistance level from an RT point of view does make interesting reading, or interesting observation, I should say. So it is, I just wanted to start off here and to say that just in case you are interested in this industry, there is an ETF that does it. It's called PRNT, pretty high expense ratio, as I mentioned. But the next thing you might say is, how many stocks are in it? So I went and I looked for you, and the answer is 56. The last two there are euro and pounds, but 56. So I took a look, and we're going to take a look now at a range of these companies. But the point is that if you are looking for companies, you are looking for inspiration for what type of companies might actually form part of a 3D printing portfolio, or simply an investment into this area, the stocks that make up the holdings can be a good idea to look for. So how you can do that is, first of all, you can look here at, if you simply Google the PRNT 3D printing ETF, you'll find this. And then if you go over here to fund documents and fund holdings, that is what brought up this. Or alternatively, you can go to top 10 holdings, and there you go, you'll get the top 10 holdings. So you can see here we have XONE, we have DDD, we have BICO. You can see a range of them, and as I say, we're going to move into this soon. But if you aren't familiar with a lot of these companies, which I expect not all of you will be, well then of course there's also ones that you will be familiar with, like HP, Hewlett Packing. So you can also see here we have Hewlett Packard, my god. Then we can also see here we've Microsoft, again, probably known to everybody in the planet, Siemens, etc. So there are some companies in there, naturally enough, the traditional companies like General Electric, United, that's UPS there, United Parcel Service, and some others. You'll see a range of all of those in there as well. So what I did though was that I thought to myself, if I was going to pick out a certain number of stocks today, which ones would I go for? and which ones might we actually take a look at. So what I did was that I took a look around at what some sort of analysts were saying around 3D printing stocks and so on. So I did do that. Investopedia was one. I had a look at a range of others. And I've put together a watch list. Okay, so I'm just going to pop on over there and I'm going to show you the watch list. Here it is, and it is made up of a range of companies, and just going to give this a moment here. So I had Faro, PRNT, this is the ETF that I was telling you about, 3D Systems, Nano Dimension, Stratasys, Protolabs, and there are others, but you know, I just wanted to start off there and give you somewhere to look at first. And you know, as I was populating this, I thought, oh, look at the recommendation colors. Not really great, are they? I've got some sell recommendations in there for Faro, for Nano Dimension, and for Protolabs. And then on the other hand, you can see we have a whole recommendation then for 3D printing, for the 3D printing ETF, 3D Systems, Stratasys, etc. But you know what particularly caught my eye when I came in today was, look at these changes in the price. 2 of the stocks that I had picked out in my watch list were up over 5%. And I said, that's an interesting figure. So I went and I had a look, and this is actually a very handy little tool within VectorVest, is if you click on a stock, and as you all know, I can look at the full stock analysis report. I'm not going to do that because I want to take you through some specific elements of it. But instead, if you right click and view stock news, I'm just going to do it for you now. Okay, and scroll down, what you'll see is Yahoo News. So then if you go in here into the Motley Fool, you'll see why 3D Systems stock jumped 12% of the week. Now it will actually, you know, if you click on that, right, as I did here, it'll give you kind of the short version. So if you click on continue reading, this is where it gets to, is in reality what happened with this stock is that last week, right, this is last week, it surged 21.5% because its earnings were spectacular. I'm just going to scroll on down. First of all, it swung from a loss to a gain, and the sales growth was up 44% over last year's fiscal second quarter. Now, it had both operating and net losses when it looked at the non-GAAP income. Sorry, it had operating and net losses, but when you looked at the non-GAAP income per share diluted, now that sounds like, here, what are they talking about? It's a methodology of accounting in the US. Non-GAAP is, as the name suggests, it's the using a different principle of accounting. Now, I'm going to tell you the difference, and it would be really interesting, and it would be well past the hour that I have with you, and you would have said, why didn't you spend an amount of time talking about it differently? But it does actually make a difference. It really does make a difference. I'm not going to elaborate on it here, but it does make a difference. I remember when I was evaluating Twitter years ago, Ardal and I decided we were making a decision of whether we'd take a position in Twitter, and that distinguishing factor actually had made a big difference in the way in which you could analyze earnings. So it is worthwhile, just not for today, in my case. But the non-GAAP income per share diluted means that if everybody who had options to buy the shares took them, it was positive at 12 cents per this year. Now, much better than the same. It was actually the symmetrical opposite the year before. So this year was positive 12 cents per share. Last year it was negative 13 cents per share. So it actually swung from a loss to a gain. And also it was much better than the analysts predicted of 5 cents per share as well. Okay. Now, if you go on and you read that piece, right, it's all very interesting. It really is all very interesting. But I do want to point out what VectorVest is very good at doing. And what VectorVest is very good at doing is taking, the shine away from the news, and let's now really look at the capability of the stock. So what it says here is that the value of the stock is actually only $6. Now, look, we often see companies where the value of the stock has to pick up. The stock market is, of course, forward-looking. It does look forward, whereas the economics and the financial statements look back. But all the same, I can't just jump past that figure, and just like the reality is that the price is much higher than the value. RV, relative value, is under 1, which means it's the long-term price appreciation potential is unfavourable. The RS is actually pretty okay. RS is relative safety. RS is consistency and predictability of financial performance. And this is what a conservative investor would look at. And in fact, any investor that is thinking of taking a long-term position would look at, conservative or otherwise. But, and the fact that it's almost close to 1 shows that it's, it's okay. The RT has been falling, okay, or is at 0.76, and it's red, which means it's been falling. So the VST is only okay, but the CI is actually quite strong. It's at 1.41. That's the stock's ability to withstand severe and or lengthy price declines. However, none of that actually was really what I wanted to show you. It's this is, if I go over here to the earnings per share, the earnings yield, look at the PE ratio. The PE ratio is 132 times. The point is here is the minute that I see any type of any experience where I am seeing a PE ratio with 3 figures before the decimal point, is if you were interested in a stock like this, you would have to be a growth focused investor. You would have to be a momentum investor, and you would have to see evidence of this continuing. Bear in mind, last week is when that report came out that I was talking about, when the stock grew by 20% last week. Today it's up by 5%. So I just want to make the point is that if you are going to be looking at this industry, like, it is swinging, you know, it's at the precipice of maybe jumping forward, but it is high risk, as you could probably expect over here. It doesn't have a dividend. It's reinvesting the money all the way back in again. And the other one that I wanted to point out, I rarely do this, by the way, but I just wanted to let you know, is that its sales per share as well is pretty high. Its sales per share is 4.92. So that is a pretty, or sorry, its price to sales is 5.92, which is pretty high. And that actually, interestingly enough, was quoted back here as well. Here, Wall Street began worrying loudly that the stock, which is unprofitable, remember that is again on the gap measure, and trades for more than 7 times sales, was getting a bit ahead of itself. In twin ratings this week, it downgraded the shares to a hold, citing valuation concerns. And then Loop Capital announced a $33 target. So this is an interesting stock for sure, for a couple of reasons. Number one is that it has caught the attention of Wall Street. It is certainly growing in terms of momentum. It has a very, very high earnings ratio when it comes to the PE ratio. And if you want to look over here, of course, it also, like, there's lots of potential for growth in here, no doubt about that. And the other thing is, and watch it, is that the RT, the relative timing, is also pointing towards the upwards. The other thing that I just want to point out to you as well is a striking characteristic that I noticed is, well, I looked at the graph of PRNT, the ETF. I'm going to go back here, maybe, going to go back 5 years, even though the ETF doesn't. Anyway, yeah, okay. So I'm going to go back here, 2017. Yeah. Now, no, actually, sorry. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back for a year, because this will still exemplify my point. Right, so here is the ETF. And then what I noticed is, I'm going to take out the treaty, is I went back and I looked at the top stock. Top stock up here is Exxon, right? Exxon, XONE. And then I looked at Exxon, and look what I found. I'm going to make sure now, PRNT, XONE. There we go. Right, now, I pretty much saw a very similar path. See? Very similar path. And of course I did, because Exxon is one of the largest holdings within the company. That is the point, is that the actual weight of it is 5.09%, and then 3D Systems, which I've just analysed there with you, is at 4.76%. That will often happen when you see a stock or an ETF that is 5% of its holding, is that you can see in that, from that point of view, there is that you're dealing with quite a high amount of money. You'll often see that. One last thing that I want to say, and then I'm totally open for any questions that anybody has, is I looked at this Investopedia report around the top 3D printing stocks for Q3. And you know what I was struck by? I took all of these, by the way, all of the stocks that were in there are all in my watch list. But I just thought it was interesting that they picked up on DDD as a value stock. Value stock, right? And I said, how could that be the case? How could it be a value stock at 30 point? Well, sorry, this was the price. And then it was saying like the price to sales ratio 6.4, and I thought, how could you pick that up as a value stock based on the PE ratio that I had? And then look what happened. As I scrolled on down, I went on down, and then I went down to fastest growing 3D printing stocks. There it is again. Went on down again, and 3D stocks, most momentum, there it is again. And then the final stock that I wanted to finish up on today is, and as I say, please do keep your comments. If you have any comments or questions, now is the time to send them in. But the other point that I want to mention here is Nano Dimension, because that is the other stock that is here in my, here we go, Nano Dimension. And I'm bringing this up to you because it is powering ahead today, right? As you can see here, it's got the percentage change in price, 6.8%, right? Now, let's take a look at this one instead, right? Because this actually looks quite different. Number one is that the stock price is much smaller and it's actually under the value that VectorVest attributes it. It actually has a better long-term price appreciation potential. It has relative safety over here that is lower, but an RT that is much lower. That is much, much lower. And this is the part that is important to distinguish between the two. Is technical analysis is when you look at a stock's short-term charts, and you're looking, of course, at short-term future as well. Fundamental analysis, which is where you look at your RV and your RS, is more long-term. You're looking at cash flows, you're looking at fundamentals, etc. Okay? CI, comfort index here is a good bit lower, but most importantly, you can see right here, we have got a sell recommendation. And that is because the stop loss for this stock is 624, 623 versus the price. On the other hand, up here, what we can see is that 3D Systems has a price above its stop loss. And that is why you're seeing one with a sell recommendation and the other is not. However, I went further and I saw in between those two stocks is that the growth rate of Nano Dimension is half that of 3D. The other thing is, of course, Nano Dimension is unprofitable. We can see that here. None of them have dividends, but I'm sure that doesn't surprise you. Like, we're dealing with an embryonic young industry that, you know, is trying to pip for the post in terms of getting the mass market out there. And then, so then if I go further, let me just go on here a little bit further on. Oh, sorry, I also want to show you the PE ratio here. You see, it doesn't make as much sense if a company is unprofitable. And then if we look over here, much bigger volume on Nano Dimension, significantly more so. And then the sales growth, so we can see here again, pretty much, well, it's not, it's 3 times actually. The 3D is looking at 3 times the sales growth of Nano Dimension. So these two stocks may have been seen, you know, relatively kind of similar in terms of some of their trajectories, but in other cases they're totally different. And it would suggest that 3D would be the more stock which has got more momentum at the moment. Nano Dimension potentially would have a long-term, based on the RV and the RS, might have more fundamental worth to it. But at the moment, it would be a roller coaster. I'm going to finish up now by looking at the graph of Nano Dimension, NNDM. Here we go. And there you go. This is why it has a sell recommendation. Now it gapped up there all right there last week. So you can see, and this is what I mean about the RT. When the RT crosses 1, it's so much there to be looking at. But as you can see here, the stock went from a high of 64.50. That was in February of this year, and that has more than halved all the way down. In fact, it went lower. It went down as far as 18. So this one would be a roller coaster of a ride. And if we zone right in here, you can see the way that is. Yeah, that's getting on. That's getting on, putting on the cowboy boots there in that case. So on that note, I am now going to bring you back in here, and I would like to just catch up with you all now again. So David says, thank you, Susan, for sharing your expertise. Duty calls me elsewhere by VV Nation. Well, thank you very much indeed, David, for being here. So could I please, if you would, I would love if you would please join me by liking this video if you enjoyed the conversation today. It always matters. It always matters, because as people are passing by this content, it's going to be a topic that is going to be very topical for quite some time. It's certainly one that I might come back and revisit as well at a certain stage in the future, because it's something that is going to change, and it's going to have a big impact on so many aspects of our lives, and it's one that is certainly worthwhile considering to keep an eye on, from whether it's environmental, social, economic, investment, etc. That can be very, very useful. So what I did today was that I started off by taking you through exactly what 3D printing is and how it's different between traditional and 3D printing, how that's different. We looked at the technology and the sectors that it applies to, as well as the sustainability angle, before moving into the economics of it, what we need to consider about that, and how COVID-19 has affected it. Then what we did was we went in and we looked at the industry from the point of view of the ETF and also where it's moving. As I say, it's on the precipice of moving into mass market. Then before looking at the ETF and its holdings, then we looked at some specific stocks and then we analysed those stocks from the inside out, as well as looking at what some outside analysts are talking about, but always using VectorVest to objectify our analysis. So on that note, I am going to say thank you so much to each and every single one of you that joined me. It is a great pleasure to run this show. I really do enjoy it, and I hope that you'll join me on the 3rd Wednesday of September. The link is already up there for the next episode of the ESG and Tech Show right here on YouTube. So to everybody, thank you all. Have a super rest of your week, and who knows where I'll be tuning in from next time. Thank you everyone, and goodbye.